We're back in the new year, and this is the first time that I get to hang out with you guys in a while, so this makes this video extra special. I am so glad to be starting off the new year with you all, and I'm very expectant to what God will do with the passage that we are studying this week. This week we find ourselves in Psalm 62. And it is a psalm of David, and it is so full of amazing things that we are going to have to take some time to get through all of it. Before we dive into this passage, I want to ask you a question. I want you to think about how you are approaching this new year. You might be ready with your lists of goals that you want to accomplish, the habits that you want to instill. Maybe your resolutions are already written down on a list. Or maybe you're on the other side of the spectrum and entering into this new year really tired and ready for some rest and recovery after a very busy holiday season, or maybe just a tough year. I think that no matter what camp you fall into, this passage has something for you. I want to start out by reading the first couple of verses that we were studying. Starting in verse 5, "Yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from him. Truly, he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken. My salvation and my honor depend on God. He is my mighty rock, my refuge." We start off our passage today in the theme of strength and rest. And sometimes these two ideals, they don't really feel like they relate. How can we rest if we're trying to be strong? And how can we be strong if we're trying to rest? All good questions. When we are trying to get to a specific place, we put in a ton of work to get there. And sometimes we say that the rest will come after. I know that this has been the case for me. As I finished out 2023, I've been living my life trying to hold it all together, get all of the things done, and then thinking in my head that I will rest afterwards, that I just needed to be strong now, and then once it was all completed, I would be able to rest. But then I started to read this week's passage, and I started to realize a few things. David is saying that rest and strength can go hand in hand, and that true strength is not from us, but it's from the Lord. In fact, I hear the start of verse 5 almost as if you're being welcomed by the most lovely person. You're being welcomed into rest. Yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from him. But what does this mean, being welcomed into rest? How is this supposed to happen? I wonder if that's what a lot of our souls need as we enter into 2024, an invitation to rest. The invitation is there. God is wanting us to find rest in him. But then when we get to rest, are we left alone, wandering around, wondering how we will actually receive and feel the effects of rest? No, David actually gives us the answer in the next verse. He starts to show us the foundation that the rest for our soul is built on. And that's the promises that God is our rock and our salvation. It's the promises that God is our fortress and that we will not be shaken, that he is our mighty rock and our refuge. And I know that it can be hard to always feel that. Trust me, I get it. When we are in a moment of wandering, questioning what we need to do next, it can be hard to fully put our trust in the fact that the foundation we build on God can be strong enough to hold us firm. When things are trying to shake us around, God can hold us firm. This is why we are instructed to pour out our hearts to God. And in fact, I'd encourage us to start making this more of a habit in our lives. Maybe this can be our habit and goal we've set in 2024. I sometimes convince myself that pouring out my heart to God must be done in such a formal way, with silence and a journal and an abundance of time. But while that is great, and if you have that, you should do that, that's not necessarily what God is asking us to do. Rest for our souls can come even in the midst of our busy schedules. Our trust in the strong foundation that God offers can be felt as we're going from class to class, or to and from our commute to work, or as we're dealing with family dinners and busy schedules. Rest comes as we talk to God, and that can happen at any time and in any place. It's lovely when we get that dedicated, uninterrupted time to pour out our hearts to God, but it also can come as we go from place to place and ask Him to come into all of the situations that we find ourselves in. It reminds me of a quote from the famous C.S. Lewis, and he says this: "I pray because I can't help myself. I pray because I'm helpless. I pray because the need flows out of me all the time, waking and sleeping. It doesn't change God, it changes me." Prayer allows us to find that trust. It allows us to find that refuge in the Lord. It begins to show what true strength is, which is what God offers. Then David continues on in this line of thinking, and he starts to remind us what happens when we put our hope and our trust in other things, when we put other things at the center of our life. When we put our hope in our own wealth or in other people, we're going to be greatly disappointed. These things don't offer a strong foundation, but instead, many times, they meet us with disappointment. He finishes off our passage by reminding us that all power belongs to the Lord, that our love must be directed to God. And so let's start to examine this and apply it to our lives. Listen, I understand completely how easy it is to put our hope in other things than the Lord. I understand how easy it can be to put our hope in our money, in our jobs, in our friends, in our communities, in ourselves. I'm guilty of this too. But everyone who calls on the name of the Lord has the opportunity to receive the strongest foundation that was bought for us when Jesus died on the cross. We have the opportunity to have the most solid hope. That can be an encouragement to us and a motivator for us. John 10:10 reminds us that the thief comes only to steal and to kill and to destroy, but the Lord has come so that we may have life and have it to the full. What would it look like for us to start 2024 knowing that we have life and can have it to the fullest extent? That full life can be planted on the strongest foundation, that is Jesus. We can spend our lives pouring out our hearts to the Lord, and He will keep us safe. This is giving me a confidence for this year, one that enables me to live so fully and go through every situation that I face with a hope and a strength. My challenge for us is to remember the strength that comes from the Lord when we make Him our refuge and when we begin to pour out our hearts to Him. So maybe this comes to us by starting out this year with some confession. What if we carried into this new year that we actually need to confess? Maybe it's time for us to admit to the Lord some of the things that we have had such a tight grip on, and that we just need to release and let go. Maybe this comes to us by starting to give thanks. On the other hand, I personally know that I can easily just talk about negative things that are happening in my life, but that affects my attitudes towards everything. And my attitude can actually radically shift when I begin to give thanks. Let's make these just a starting point as we reflect on Psalm 62. I hope that Psalm 62 actually gives you permission to enter into rest. It gives you permission to begin to pour out your heart to God, and just a reminder that we can pour out our heart to God. I hope that it gives you a reminder of the strength, the power, and the love that Jesus brings. Have a great week.